The silence, the terror, the pain, the horror as your mom comes downstairs. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a time capsule episode of The Slay Report. I'm your king of bedside manner, Devin Decker, and joining me is my host companion, Sejan Sarowick. Sejan?
So tempting to keep going with the lyrics on that.
Which is kind of why we're here. It's and also
more not wanting to be an insult to you, really.
Ouch, that's hurt. Well, the reason why I call myself the king of bedside manner, if you know, you know, and that's all we're gonna say about that particular subject at this moment. But yeah, it is one of those situations where I don't even freaking know. It's a time capsule episode. We do these episodes every once in a while when we want to make sure that we have an episode banked and put aside for when we have to miss a recording session. It happens, right? We all have lives. Things happen to all of us. Maybe cinnamon tea was a wrong decision before recording this episode. Oh man, that turned into a weird energy siege, and you talk for a bit.
I thought you were about to start yelling at people, like, so back off, all right?
No, I tried to go positive with it.
No, you tried to get there, and it didn't quite make it. Oh, man. No, but yeah, so usually what we do in these kinds of episodes is we pick like a subject and stick to it, and perhaps one that's not very timely, although our last couple you could point to as being kind of timely.
You know, but they are definitively of the time that we're recording it. The whole time capsule thing, I love an origin story, came out of the fact that we thought it would be hilarious to bank an episode about the Zach Braff, Michael Imperioli podcast sitcom, Alex Inc. It's just Alex Inc., right? It wasn't Alex Incorporated.
Yes. No, I think it was called Alex Inc. I think was the true name. Yep.
Yeah, and we called it Alex Incorporated. That was our inside joke of the Slay Report, and we're like,
oh, because we're so imaginative.
But if you want to find the episode, that's the title of the episode, because again, so imaginative. But then as it turned out, we like banked this episode about this show, and I was really like happy to talk about the show. We watched the whole season, and then it was immediately canceled, which meant that essentially we had expired SpaghettiOs in a can that we were just waiting to serve up to you, the listener, and that felt wrong. That felt like the wrong thing to do.
Especially because that can was pretty dented by the time we got a hold of it.
Yeah, they were probably, what we had done was we found an empty tin can, and we're like, oh, let's see what's inside of it, and it was Alex Inc. And then we're like, oh, you know what though? We can put it into another tin can and we'll mark it this time. So that's what we did. And we don't know how long it had been in that tin can beforehand, right? Like that show was based on like a real podcasting magnate. Like it was one of those autobiographical sitcoms that were like nouveau at the time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting to talk this much about Alex Inc. ever
Neither
again.
was I. I'm sorry. Well, I liked it. It's a good origin. Anywho, so then we decided that for the time capsule episodes, we're going to look at a thing.
Zach Braff things. No, wait, what?
No. Stop saying Zach Braff. It brings a negativity that I am not prepared for. Will has.
You say his name a dozen times, he shows up expecting money.
Excuse me. I don't. That was a terrible ZB from me. Aha, I found your weakness, Garden State. Anywho, so we look at a specifically focused thing. Now, we're recording this. This is our first December recording of the year 2022. I'm very excited about it. Hopefully you're not listening to it in 2022, but now that I've said that, you probably are. So, welcome. And if not, go on Twitter and give us a pat on the back for making it longer than 4 weeks with this episode. That's true, if it's still around. I mean, I'm sure that later episodes than this one, we've told you where to find us. So find us there and let us know. This is all a lot to say. December puts me in a certain type of mood. Maybe it's because the streets are filled with Christmas cheer, and at least it's only once a year. But it's a green Christmas for me, is what I'm trying to say. Because we're talking about the Barenaked Ladies. And it was 2001, it was 1998, when I received for Christmas a copy of the album Stunt by the Barenaked Ladies, which was their, like, breakout album in the United States of America. They'd been big in Canada for a very long time. Also very, like, weird to consider now that we've put on all the work for Mighty Ducks, that Grade 9 was used in Mighty Ducks 3 like 2 whole years before that album came out, before they hit big with 1 week. Like that.
Grade 9 is wait. So Grade 9 is not on that album.
No, Grade 9 is off of Gordon.
Okay, I thought you meant that it was off of the album. Okay, I see what you're saying now.
I'm saying
so Barenaked Ladies. Okay, but that's the trick of it, right? Is this is the same problem that we talk about every year with the Grammys, where Glass Animals is nominated for Best New Artist, despite the fact that they've had a decade's worth of albums coming out consistently before this that people were buying and listening to, but yet it wasn't until this year that they were nominated for Best New Artist, which is insane to me, right? And that is the same problem that you're talking about here, is that when we think about the Barenaked Ladies, you and I, maybe this isn't all of America, but like you and I think about Stunt. We think about 1 week. We think about that being like the big thing that brought everybody's attention to the Barenaked Ladies. But as what you're getting to, they had a pretty avid career before that. They just were doing it a little too far north for our ears.
Yeah. Come to find out that my father on business trips would listen to Barenaked Ladies because he had been singing $1 Million for years before it got radio play. And I just thought it was like an old camp song that he knew from Boy Scouts. And then he's like, no, it's the Barenaked Ladies. It's that band that you like. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea that's who this is. But like, and it's not one of those things where like I hadn't heard songs from them before. I remember like borrowing a CD from a Canadian friend that I had made while traveling, like with my parents. It was on a cruise ship. I don't know why I like buried that lead. I worked on a cruise ship for a year. I'm not embarrassed by it. But it and they had given it to me, and it was a copy of Gordon, come to find out years later. And I didn't realize it, but I really enjoyed it listening to it in like 1995. And I'm like, this is really good stuff. But then I never connected it with the Barenaked Ladies once I got the Stunt album in 1998. And that's just...
Yeah, well, and I think that that's something very purposeful with the music machine that exists here in the United States. I think there is a very big, like... creating a mythos around a band is hugely important, even nowadays, even though that system is kind of janky and broken and not what it used to be. Like, it's still part of the whole building a brand, is that you need to create this legendary mythos about how the band came to be, or at least came to be here for us. And I think Stunt is the album that the US music machine wants us to believe is the big breakout album for Barenaked Ladies, which is, as stated previously, fucking ridiculous, because they've had a decade's worth of music before that was already knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, it is. It's just nuts. But Stunt is where they come into my life, right? Stunt is where they come into pretty much every American's life, because that's when they were getting airplay with 1 week. It was being played at all the lock-ins that were happening at the middle school. And
I don't know if they had an American premiered music video before 1 week, right? Like, as just talking about being part of the machine, like I remember 1 week as a music video on MTV in the mornings. Like, that's how I came to know that song. I would wake up super early, and when I was a kid, I would watch things like Gummy Bears and the live action Alice in Wonderland and all that sort of like creepy shit that they only put on for kids at 6 a.m. because parents aren't up yet. But then that evolved when I got to a point where I wanted to, be too cool for school for kids stuff anymore, and wanted to get in on the like the what the older kids were doing. So I would watch MTV in the mornings before I would go to school, and that's where I learned about Barenaked Ladies with 1 week. I mean, I got a lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers that way. Eventually, it would lead to how I discovered Green Day when Minority and Warning was released, and that was the album I came in on Green Day on. Like, all sorts of weird shit. I also remember like Fiona Apple that had the really weird slow song where she was like half naked in a closet in like a trailer at a dead trailer park. And like when I was a kid, that was
Criminal?
Like, oh yeah. Is that's Fiona Apple, right?
Loeb, actually.
Huh?
'Cause I'm living like a criminal.
I couldn't tell you the song. I could not tell you.
I don't
the
know.
song.
It's either Fiona Apple or it's Lisa Loeb. I'm just an asshole.
And
We
I
should
thought I
look
was
it up.
super edgy for like watching this thing before I went to school every morning, right? And then beside that was Barenaked Ladies, which in retrospect might be the least edgiest band you could tell people you were into. It was just fun to say the name when you were six. Like that's really what it was about.
Yeah, it is Fiona Apple. You are correct. I don't know why I thought of Lisa Loeb. Well, I know why I thought of Lisa Loeb. A later story about the Barenaked Ladies. But yeah, so they were this thing. Stun happened. You know what talking about MTV in the morning, right? Because there was a thing that I think every kid did because they were still that was when you could see music videos on MTV. Was in the morning waiting for.
I would watch the morning like wake up where they would just play videos, music videos for a couple of hours in the morning, and then they turn into their midday MTV stuff, and then I'd come home and watch TRL. This was prime MTV time for Siegen, 1998 to like 2003.
I get it because Waiting for Tonight by Jennifer Lopez, I only knew that song because I saw the premiere of the video. And like, ask anybody about Waiting for Tonight by Jennifer Lopez, they probably don't remember that song. Do you remember that song?
Waiting for Tonight.
That one.
Oh, that one?
Yeah, well, we do a show together, so
That is like one of her most famous songs. It shows up in like every movie after it comes out for like 5 years.
Really?
It is everywhere.
Well,
yeah, there's club mixes of it that still get played today. Like wait, what are you talking about?
I fell in with
You
a
remember
group
Jennifer Lopez is one of her most famous club beats ever? Yes, I do, Def. Yeah. I went to a lot of clubs in college.
I went to a barbecue and I put that song on and everybody was like, "Who the fuck is this?" And
I mean,
like,
because
Jennifer
I
Lopez.
love Jennifer Lopez, but that's not the kind of music you put on at a fam jam barbecue, my brother.
It was not a fam jam barbecue. It was like
everybody get out, your LSD. Let's do this shit. I've got glowing pacifiers to pass around.
It was one of those moments where I'm just like, oh, I am different from my group of friends currently. That was the same barbecue where a girl stuck her hand in a blender, and I always tell this story. It wasn't one of those like blender, like I say stuck her hand in a blender, you're thinking about a certain type of blender, right? Everybody out there is thinking about a certain type of blender. Oh, no. She was induction blending something and put her hand into the vessel she was induction blending in.
Hell, these don't sound like smart people to begin with, Devin.
Yeah,
so
right.
No wonder they didn't know who Jennifer Lopez was.
I really want to thank you.
Maybe not the best way to base future like theories off
I want to thank you for reminding me, or really teaching me, that Waiting for Tonight by Jennifer Lopez is a song that other people know. The other one that I think of is Learn to Fly by the Foo Fighters, because Tenacious D was in the video. And
and they were one of the very first MTV. What was the making the video? That was the name of the show, right?
Yeah.
Learn to Fly was in that first season of making the video and was like an amazing making the video because while the rest of them were like, yeah, we're gonna put the artist in this field and move this camera around them in weird angles. They were like, yeah, so we have a fuck ton of costume work we need to do. We have set pieces we need to get in here. Like that is a wild music video.
Every band member is playing at minimum 2 roles.
Yeah, minimum 2, but I think Dave Grohl alone plays like 5, right?
Yeah.
Like
That's why minimum. Yeah, Dave Grohl is the pilot briefly. He's like his own kids at one
he's
point.
He's one of the overweight ladies, right? Like there's a whole bunch of it's amazing character work. And then like you pointed out, like also Tenacious D is there, which is just like at the time was hilarious. Like what a pull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it. So
1998 was a weird time for music, man.
Weird, wonderful, wild, wacky time for music, and Stunt was right there in the middle. Now, 1999, I win tickets to go see the Barenaked Ladies play live at the 92 Pro FM, local references get your local work, Jingle Mingle at PPAC, of all places. I'm going to, like, the place that to me, at this point, is for hoity-toity, fancy theatrical experiences. And the Barenaked Ladies are going to play there?
Yeah, just to highlight the parallels, I went to go see them play the Jingle Mingle, but it was after Maroon came out. Was that 2005?
Maroon, I believe. Maroon is 2003, I think.
Yeah. So it was not the last time that they played the Jingle Mingle, but that was also when I went to go see them.
I saw them play all.
There
were 5 Jingle Mingles going from 1999 through to 2003. And they played Jingle Mingle 1, Jingle Mingle 3, and Jingle Mingle 5. 1 was at PPAC, 3 was at, God, was it the Dunk yet? Or was it just the Providence?
No.
It might have been
Shoot, what was it before? It was the Convention Center or Civic Center?
the
Wasn't
Civic
it the
Center. It
Providence
was the
Civic Center?
Providence Civic Center.
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't the Dunk yet, and now it's the Amp, right? Because Time Capsule, right? We'll teach you all about history. That was where the second one was, and that was a really like cool show because like what's his name? Uncle
Maroon was
Cracker
2000. There
played
we go.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, Maroon was
Yeah,
2000. That makes sense. Yeah.
So Maroon was 2000, and that was when BNL played the Jingle Mingle that time, right? And they were opened up by the Cranberries, which was
Fucking
phenomenal.
phenomenal, right? Oh, I'm
Yeah,
so happy
yeah.
I saw the Cranberries. Like, this is really cool show. And then the fifth one is, I've talked about it on the show before, because this is when I met Maroon 5. Because they had done $99.29, 23-cent tickets, and they were in the nosebleed of the Ryan Center, parallel to the stage. So like,
man.
it was awful. Like, you could not see anything, and that's why I like, oh, there's some empty seats there. Let's go wander down. And then lo and behold, I'm sitting behind Adam Levine and the rest of Maroon 5, and it's like, oh, we don't belong here. And then they turn and go, you guys don't belong here, do you? And like, no, we can go. And they're like, nah, we're gonna tell them you're with us because it's more fun to party with people.
Well, and then just to really put a stamp on what we're saying about Stunt being out in '98 and in America, that being kind of like the big like, holy shit, Barenaked Ladies, 1 week, it's playing everywhere, all that sort of stuff, right? Their greatest hits album came out in 2001, 3 years later. So 3 years after we, as a nation, discovered the Barenaked Ladies, they already have a greatest hits album that they're putting out. Because, to their credit, in 2001, they'd been making music for over a decade. so it made sense for them to, right?
And that greatest hits album, one of my favorite like titles ever. The fact that it's disc 1, all of our greatest hits, which is a reference to Gordon. I was working at the radio station that the Coventry High School like was affiliated with. I was working at that radio station, and I was put in charge of the contests because the guy's like, I can't trust anybody else to actually do the contest, Devin. So he put me in charge of contests. So what that meant is once a month, I would go to Walmart, I'd meet with the store manager at Walmart, and I would be given 2 CDs. And for that whole month, we would play that CD as the Walmart CD of the month. And then at the end of the month, we would have a giveaway, and you could win a copy of that album. And a lot of the times it was new music, but when the Barenaked Ladies Greatest Hits album came out, I requested that we get that because, like, there's all this music. It's so crazy that they did a Greatest Hits album, and we had a lot of, like, early Barenaked Ladies in rotation on that station. We did a lot of, like, Old Apartment. We did Shoebox, because Shoebox was, like, this weird song that people knew because it was in Friends, or it was at least on the Friends soundtrack. So, like, people knew it from Friends way before 1 week. Like, there are those hipster Barenaked Lady fans who are like, you're a 1 week fan? I had Shoebox on the Friends soundtrack, and then I just clap in their face and they run away.
I mean, as we sit here recording an episode about Gordon, but we'll get there.
But it's one of those situations. So then I loved that album. Every time I worked, I made sure I was playing it, I was in charge of it, and I fell in love with all their old songs, so much so that November of 2001, when that album comes out, when like I go to Sam's Records and Tapes in Cranston. Did you ever go to Sam's Records and Tapes? There's so many local references. I don't even care though.
I was a Strawberries guy, right over the line in Seekonk. That's where I was always going for stuff.
Sam's Records and Tapes was an independent shop across from Mardi Gras. So, like, it was a cool place to go. You want to think about, like, Championship Vinyl and High Fidelity? That was the type of store it was. And whenever I needed a quote-unquote obscure album, that's where I went. So when I wanted to get a copy of Gordon, that's where I go. And it turns out that Sam had in his shop an original printing of the album with the white cover art and all the guys on it. It is silver in the center, like, because they have that ball on the cover of Gordon that's blue, white, and red. And that original pressing, they didn't want to paint the silver part white, so they just left it silver. So, like, I have one of the original pressings of that CD, and that became, like, this cherished part of my collection, so much so that I ended up going to Newberry Comics after buying that at Sam's Records and Tapes and buying another copy of Gordon, understanding that, well, I should never play this album version, right? I don't want to destroy it. And then years later, I got it signed by the Barenaked Ladies. So, like, it was this really cool, like journey for me. And that was at Mohegan Sun. And I ended up talking with Ed and securing music rights for one of the short films I was working on with people in our department. So like it was a really cool experience that I had with the Barenaked Ladies. So they're all this, but Gordon, after that Greatest Hits album, listening to Gordon, and I remember the guy who was with me, it was my friend Anthony at the time, and Anthony had like 15 years of me. He was an older dude. And we get in the car, and I open it up, and he goes, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not Mom. This ain't fun new listen to the album time. And I'm like, I just want to read the liner notes. I'm not going to make you listen to the Barenaked Ladies. You seem like you'd think you're too cool for that. But I wanted to read the liner notes, because the other thing about their Greatest Hits album, Disc 1, All Their Greatest Hits, is it is a thick freaking liner notes guide, because they wrote like little essays about every single song and why they decided to put it on that album. It was wonderful. It was glorious. And then I find my way to Gordon, and I love Gordon. And at this point, Gordon is 10 years old, that I'm buying it in 2002. And I fall in love with it, so much so that the next Christmas, 2003, I ask for the entire like discography of the Barenaked Ladies. And I got so many Barenaked Ladies albums that year. It was also the year that Everything to Everyone came out, their sixth album. And so like whenever we were driving around, that's what we would listen to. I ended up going to see them alone without like my parents when they did the Everywhere for Everyone tour. So like Barenaked Ladies mean a lot to me, and they have meant a lot to me since I got that stunt. And it was one of those things where like in middle school everybody called me the Barenaked Ladies guy, and I don't know if that's because I kind of look like Stephen Page, just like a little bit, or if it's the fact that like my sensibilities, they got that. But I remember when Get in Line came on while we were in gym class, this guy Mike just yells, "Yo, it's Devin Decker's song!" And so I love it. So when it came time to record a time capsule episode in December, clearly I have visions of Barenaked Ladies dancing in my head. That didn't sound right. I was just trying to mock Sugar Plums. But
there's a lot of people to take out of context in our conversations. If we started worrying about that now, we'd have 10 years of stuff we'd have to go back on. Man.
These 22 minutes, though, they feel very charged. But yeah, so I'm always thinking about the Barenaked Ladies at this season. It is the 30th year anniversary. It's the 30-year anniversary since they released Gordon on an unsuspecting public, June 28th, 1992, or July 28th, 1992, and I wanted to celebrate it, but like we had a real big theme, like the movies that made us was our very special episode. So like this seemed like the right place to celebrate this album. And now that we've given you enough talking, the length of an Everybody Loves Raymond episode, we should probably talk about the album.
Yeah.
Are you ready to talk about the
Well, what's
album?
crazy is that we talk about there being a greatest hits album in 2001, but if I were to put together my own greatest hits of the Barenaked Ladies that like were the songs that were really like meaningful to me, through various like hangouts, friends, karaoke nights, things like that, half of the album would be made up of songs off of Gordon. Hello City, Grade 9, Brian Wilson, Be My Yoko Ono, like King of Bedside Manor, like there's the number of songs that are on Gordon that if I had $1 million, which is the one that you alluded to earlier with your father, right? Like that is to me like definitive Barenaked Ladies. Even if we're getting away from all the other nonsense because we listened to the album so much, because Gordon was one of the few albums that we had in the house, right? Like we had Stunt. I got Stunt when it came out, and that was really cool. And then a few years later, I think Zach, actually, to be fair, was the one that got Gordon, and like I think I stole it from him, like because I was listening to it so much. But removed even from that idea of like, well, this was the one album we had now, so of course I'd know it. If I had $1 million right now, if you asked somebody to name a Barenaked Ladies song, a good number of people, that would be the first one they would name, right? Like there are just some definitive tracks on this album.
And to think that it's their first like major studio album is insane. Because up to this, they had released 5 cassette tapes, and the one that they did before, the yellow tape. If you ever have the opportunity, I'm pretty sure it's out there. I think the Trust Me EP is the best place to get like a listenable copy of it. The yellow tape version of $1 Million is so good, because we say greatest hits album 2001, but like you don't you also need to consider Rock Spectacle, which came out in 1996, which is a live album, but essentially also works as a greatest hits album for them.
Yeah.
So, like, they
Yeah,
called
yeah.
it
I
their
mean, that
greatest
comes down
hits
to
for
a
a while,
preference
too.
thing.
No,
That totally comes down to a preference thing. I am gonna right here tell everyone right now that live albums are not my jam. I'm not a big live music guy when it comes to after the fact listening. Being there is really cool. And there are some like shows that are just like can't be denied. There's some tours and things like that that are just phenomenal. My one of the first DVDs, I think the first DVD we ever owned in our house was an Eagles live album, right? Or like the band, the movie, the
The
band
Last
by
Waltz.
Last Waltz. Thank you.
Yeah.
That is about the band. Yeah, yeah. Like those are there are definitely like definitive live music things that I can get behind, but any day given a preference, I will never pick a live album.
Yeah, I agree. But because of that live album having come out in 1996, for so many people, that version of Million Dollars was the one that people knew. It wasn't until that greatest hits album came out that the version off of Gordon started to get airplay, and
Oh,
that's
the
when
that
like
version of $1,000,000 was the definitive karaoke version for all of Ohio, as far as I can tell.
the with have a fruit roll up. That one
Yeah,
really?
yeah,
That's a
that one, yeah,
shame.
it really fucked with everybody that thought they knew that song because who doesn't know that song? And then suddenly they've got this weird version of the song that's not the version they know.
Yeah, that's why
Now
I've
I'm just bitching about karaoke in
That's
Ohio,
fine.
and
You
nobody
can
needs to hear
bitch
about
about
that.
karaoke in Ohio as much as you want. But yeah, it's one of those situations where I like the yellow tape version because no doubt that $1,000,000 off of Gordon is an iconic recording. I love it. I love the Dijon ketchup. They have pre-wrapped sausages, but they don't have pre-wrapped bacon. Like all of the little interstitials that they put on that one are very, very good. But I really like the yellow tape version is that little bit faster that you get from the live version, but it's still like studio mixed. Seek it out. That's my recommendation there. It's not better than Gordon, but it's my preferred alternative to Gordon, if that makes
Interesting.
sense. Like if I'm
Yeah,
putting together a playlist and I'm not really like $1,000,000 off of Gordon, it's kind of a slow jam, right? And it's a banger. It's a banger slow jam. But if you want to keep the pace up but drop $1,000,000 in there, yellow tape version is where you go. I wish I
just
had
building
on
your
my
ultimate
Dickies
mix.
shirt. Yeah. Oh man. I mean, my ultimate mix is one of those reasons why Hello City is one of the songs we listened to when we hung out. Because
Yeah,
whenever we were going to Providence, that was track one on my ultimate mix of Barenaked
yeah.
Ladies songs.
Hello City was always good. But the big thing about Hello City that got really popular, like first track off of this album, phenomenal intro track going into the album, right? And it becomes for around us. We went to school at prime time a cappella season. Like for like there was like a decade where a cappella was just the shit, and right smack dab in the middle of it were our 4 years at URI, right? And Hello City is just like it became an acapella standard. I don't know if it was before the big like acapella push of the 2000s, but like it is now a standard for vocal groups. And so I've heard so many different versions of that song because of student groups I've gone to and like live recordings and like shows like talent shows like America's Got Talent and bullshit like that. Like Hello City is just always one of those ones that they fall back on because it's got phenomenal harmonies. It's got a lot of really good parts to it. There's not too much going on in the instrumentals. It's like it fit that bill so perfectly that when acapella years came around, like it was just the number one hit.
Yeah. I never heard any of that. I don't know how I avoided it, but I avoided all acapella until Pitch Perfect happened. I mean, like,
I mean, Pitch
boys.
Perfect was like the apex of acapella madness, where we decided that we were going to dedicate an entire what was supposed to originally be like an American Pie style comedy styling to the idea of the acapella world, and then slowly it just devolved into like, oh, people are actually super into this. Like maybe we shouldn't make fun of it so much.
Yeah. But we probably talked about that on the episode we recorded after this, because I have some thoughts about Pitch Perfect, but this is not the platform to share them. But yeah, it's acapella didn't really come into my life until Pitch Perfect, and at that point Glee had also happened, so Don't Stop Believing and the music of Journey became the like go-to that I heard everywhere. which also
Yeah,
makes
I mean,
sense. Like,
right. Yeah. I was sitting through more than just one song at a time. So like you're not wrong. That Journey was definitely like a number one hit for a lot of them too.
yeah, I mean, it's Glee unapologetically, and I mean, I'm not upset about it. Really brought "Don't Stop Believin'" back into the fold. We're talking about Gordon though, because this is album. I mean, these guys they had
With a stolen version of that song. We
yeah.
should make sure that we always
Oh,
highlight that what
yeah.
Glee ended up what we found out about Glee years later is how much music they ended up stealing from other people.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. This might be the only time we talk about Glee on the show, unless like maybe we lose a bet or we just got nothing else to talk about. We do a time capsule on Glee. So who knows? But yeah, so Gordon, they had done the 5 cassettes and then they win a contest to get actual studio time from CFNY, a local Canadian radio station. And these guys who've been playing music together and just having a blast doing it, they're like kids in a candy store when they get into that recording studio. So what you get in Gordon is this just naked and unafraid version of this group. Something that, as much as I like their music still, I don't think they've ever touched the same level that they were able to touch with Gordon. And Gordon's not even my favorite album by them. It's their best album, in my opinion, but my favorite album is Maybe You Should Drive. And that's a whole other thing, probably for a later time capsule, depending on how we feel after this one.
Yeah.
But
part of it is the industry has really changed in terms of like how you discover music and how you start a band and how you create and what the journey is to that first studio album. I feel like, and I'm not in the industry, so somebody could correct me on this, but it feels like nowadays it's a much shorter time span between like when you decide you want to get into music and when you need to start developing like a fan base and getting singles out there and then eventually collections of singles because nobody does an album anymore. But that idea being that they had 5 albums under their belt before they really recorded Gordon is amazing. But then like 10 years later, looking at a band like Blink-182, where they were so pressed to make sure that they had a full album together that they recorded Buddha with like Tom DeLonge having like a cold and a drummer that they didn't love, and they just forced that album out the door because they just needed to get one out. And that was the same year, I think, that Stunt drops. I think it's 98 that Buddha comes out. And so that idea that like even 10 years later that bands were feeling this weird pressure to like not have that time to grow, to like develop who they were is like it's crazy. And then you get to now where like if you're not discovered like singing at church when you're like 6, then you're not going to be a career artist later. Sorry. Like unless Drake stumbles over you at like a Walmart while you're singing in the aisles, like you're not going to hit it big, sorry kid.
You're really making me nervous because like those are the fantasies I have. Is that really the only way to make it? Because the reason that they're fantasies of mine is because of how unbelievable that would be if that were to happen.
I mean, I've only named 2 actual stories of current artists that are out there, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, right? I mean, but those are the ones who are like global superstars too. You need to consider that one as well, because there's also the fact that you can be a career musician. You're just probably recording and producing your stuff on your own and releasing it onto the internet via SoundCloud, hoping to develop a following. Like,
let me put it this way. If you want to be an artist on the level of notoriety and fame as somebody like the Barenaked Ladies, which admittedly, not even they are like chart topper guarantees, right? Like, we're not talking like T-Swift levels of we put out an album every 6 months and they all outsell the billboards, but we are talking about a group of artists that everyone is pretty damn well aware of and have been going strong for, in this country, 20 years, but 25 years, but like, as we have stated multiple times, have had a career in music for 30, right? Like it's, they've
had a recorded career in music for 30 years because there's at least another 3 on top of that,
right,
at least, where they were performing together as the Barenaked Ladies. So it's insane. And those tapes, like if you have one of those tapes, they're probably not worth much because it's magnetic tape, so it's probably degraded at this point. But like, you were there, you were hearing them develop their sound. But I will borrow an anecdote from Ed Robertson of the Barenaked Ladies, and when he ran into Willem Dafoe, and Willem Dafoe looked at him and said, "I know who you are. You know who I am, but we don't know each other. Bye." and they went their separate ways. So like the Barenaked Ladies are at least on a level where Willem Dafoe can recognize one of the lead singers.
Yeah. I mean, like again, like I'm not going to sit here and we're not going to talk about them like international superstars here in 2022. But there was a time where we could have talked about them like that. I mean, like they were huge in that like late 90s, 2000s era.
Yeah. I mean, they got to play with LFO and Lou Bega at the Providence Performing Arts Center siege, and I can think of no higher honor.
I'll play with LFO any day of the week.
Oh,
Lou
I
Bega,
love LFO. Well,
I don't know what Lou Bega's like in his personal life. If he's cool to hang out with, that'll be fun. But his music's not enough to bring me to the party.
So that Lou Bega, that show, right? That first time I saw the Barenaked Ladies live, Lou Bega opened his set with Mambo Number 5. He did Tricky Tricky. He did that third song that he had, and then he closed out his set with Mambo Number 5. Lou Bega performed 4 songs, and that's all.
You know, if you're a true Lou Bega fan, then you have those cassette tapes of Mambo Number 1.
Oh yeah. You probably have all the way to Mambo Number 69.
He had to end there, right? It's the funny number. He was just like, "This is it. This is I've hit
either I
Mambo.
stop at Mambo 69 or I keep going to Mambo 420." And do I have that many Mambos in me? Do I know that many women? It's all about
names. I've done 69 of these. I've run out of names.
It's all about Skeskarorusha. I guess sounds female, right? Please stop buying these. I want to stop. I should have stopped. Oh, that's a real sliding door.
You should have stopped at Mambo number 34, which was the Klingon Mambo, but you know.
I don't want to talk Klingon on the Say Report. That's one of those unwritten rules of the Say Report.
We never talk Klingon.
We never speak Klingon on this show. The Say Report, a show about everything, but never presented in Klingon. What were we talking about? Oh, so yeah. But then LFO comes on after Lou Bega, and they do a set. And the Barenaked Ladies opened up their set with Mambo number 5.
Those bastards.
Because, like, of course they did. But then, like, Lou Bega came out and he's saying, do they know it's Christmas time with them? So, like, clearly they're probably fun guys to hang out with and, like, collaborate with. So, but yeah, we're here to talk about Gordon, which is this album that I don't even know, because we talk about Stunt as like their reemergence. After Gordon, their star shines real bright. I mean, it wins Canadian Album of the Year, right? But none of the singles, 6 singles off of the 15-song album, none of them hit number 1 at all, right? It's just the album that is celebrated, which, like, what can you imagine a world where albums are celebrated and not just a single song, where single songs are not called albums the way the Grammys do it now? Like, I don't get it at all. Album of the Year, like, that should be like minimum 10 songs to me. Not just one. I mean,
song. There's a conversation to be had. This is on the level of like, is a $40 game worth less time than a $60? Like, no, like talking about how big an album is ridiculous. If there's good music on it and it is put out as an EP, it should be qualified,
right. Okay,
right?
But I'm not even talking about EPs. I'm talking about the fact that one song is called Album of the Year now.
Right, when somebody is able to put out a single nowadays, right? I'm saying you need to clarify.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Because there are some artists that put out like 3-song albums, and it's just like Trent Reznor will just go out of his mind, just like doing a fucking orchestrated piece for 30 minutes and put it out as a single. But it's 30 minutes of your time, like.
I mean, Alice's Restaurant, is it an album? No, it's. That's a good point. It's just one of those situations where there was a time of albums. And I think one of the reasons why Barenaked Ladies appealed to me was because very clearly they set out to record an album. Like, there was a theme that they were trying to speak on and share. Like, Stunt is about loss in a lot of weird ways. Like, that's like 1 week in the whole, I'm the kind of guy who laughs at a funeral. And then you have songs like, Leave, the 5th song off that album, which is like he wants to grieve his brother, but he doesn't know how to do that while he still has happy memories of his brother.
For sure, but I mean, like let's focus on Gordon in that same regard, though, right? Is like you're talking about a group of guys that are hitting it really big, and they are pop, whether or not that's pop rock or pop college rock or whatever the hell you want to call it. Like, they are popular, right? And they are putting together music that is catchy, fun to sing, all of the good stuff that we love in pop music. But there is this like it's cliche to say, oh, there's a darkness to them, right?
But
But I
there is
mean,
a
that's what it
darkness to
is,
this
right?
album,
Like
yeah.
and like sometimes that darkness is extremely playful, where they're like making fun of some of the dumb shit they've done in their life. Look at something like Grade 9, right? Or King of Bedside Manor has some really dark, weird elements to it, but there's also all of the sound effects that are going on and all that, like really fun stuff. Be My Yoko Ono gets really silly, but then you also have like songs on that album like Brian Wilson, which was the first time that I like at the time I didn't understand that this was about. I'm not claiming that suddenly at the the age 10 when I was listening to this album or whatever it was, like it hit me like a ton of bricks what depression was and that I might have some like level of it. But like in retrospect, recognizing that it was a piece of art that was acknowledging these feelings that you are experiencing as an artist who is just trying to create, and like you don't know what like that next step is going to be, and it's to the point where you wonder, is this it for me, is this the end of everything, and it just spirals from there, right? And like having those weird thoughts in your head consistently, and like I appreciate now at 35 as someone that like is dealing with some of that stuff, that I had something like that to listen to at the time that was not just a jump to just like straight up kill yourself, or like those problems don't exist. There's all sorts of like bad ways that could have gone, right? But I had Brian Wilson to lean back on.
Yeah, Brian Wilson is an important song for me. I absolutely love that tune, and yeah, it's that darkness. And then you have things like Wrap Your Arms Around Me, which
Yeah.
is about, I can't even like begin to parse out all of the different themes that are in that particular song.
The other one on that album that's really big for me is The Flag, and it's
Yeah.
a lot of that same way, is that they take a lot of really complex pieces but then point them all in the same direction, right? It's not that they don't all work together. It's just that sometimes it's a square, sometimes it's a triangle, and sometimes it's a circle, all within the same song. And so to that, like that's another piece of them, right? Is that their music is not, while it is poppy and fun to sing and all of that, it's not simple. There are parts of stunt that are still like beyond me being able to sing unless there is a monitor in front of me, and like I'm drunk enough and I don't care when I stumble. And even then I'm not getting it right, right? Like it's this idea that there is a complexity to the fact that they are producing pop music in that regard.
Yeah. I don't know, and it's pure. Gordon is pure. And I think that's what I like, because they're just having fun, right? You read any discussion about it, there were apparently no issues with any of them during the recording. They just came in there to have a good time. King of Bedside Manor, like they were nervous about recording it, and I get that, just in terms of the themes that they're singing about, and being like 25-year-old guys singing these songs and talking the way that they're talking, like for their first album, because there's a lot of satire about the music industry on Gordon as well. Something like Box Set, which one of my big dreams when I was a kid was to one day get to go out and buy that Barenaked Ladies box set that is just a real world representation of that song. But like
Yeah.
the way that music has gone, that's never going to happen. No one is going to release something like that unless it's some
It'll have
novelty
to be
piece. Like,
right. It'll have to be some type of private business that gets behind that idea nowadays. Like we depend on guys like in film, it's like the Criterion Collection or
right,
Arrow, right?
limited run games and
Mondo
video games. Like,
Mondo does some really good stuff with music, but that music is usually geared towards stuff like film and television. Like I've got this gorgeous Luke Cage soundtrack that they put out. Like it is possible for this stuff to exist, but it takes a person with enough money and no time, like too much time, I mean, on their hands, to just like, here, let's do this thing because I love the Barenaked Ladies. So we just gotta hope that there's just a really rich, really like open open schedule like Barenaked Ladies fan out there that decides to do that one day, and maybe we'll get it.
I mean, I'd be, if I had the money, I guess it would be
Right.
me, right? But it's also one of those situations where the way that the music industry has gone in the 30 years since Gordon, a box set back then, right? The type of box sets that they're singing about, maybe like $60 to $100 is going to be the most you're paying for something like that.
Which was a lot in 1992,
Right,
94,
exactly,
whatever, right?
exactly. But if that were to come out now, right? If someone were to take the time, cultivate that album, put it out, that it like minimum $500.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, what it is
cost
it'd
of
be tiered,
admission.
right?
Yeah.
Like you could get the digital version for like $300 because it would still come with a lot of features and stuff like that. But then there'd be a physical version for 450, and then there'd be like a deluxe version for $800, right?
Yeah. And for $1,000, there are 10 limited edition copies. You have to just be lucky enough to be there when it releases in order to have it in your collection.
Right.
And then there'd also be the people, right? And this is collecting on the whole, not just with like music memorabilia, but like we are in the shadow of everything that happened with Taylor Swift tickets 2 weeks ago, right? And Ticketmaster and people being on Ticketmaster for 12 hours to then be told that you can buy tickets to Taylor Swift. It's going to cost you literally $20,000 a ticket.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's just the cost of music. But there would be people who'd like, well, I need the digital copy and I need all three of those physical copies, even though and if I could get two, right, one to like rock and one to stock, then that's even better. Like it just everything has been commoditied into collectibles, and it's an unfortunate thing because like I would just want to pay like $100 to get 6 albums, 2 of which are empty because some other label owns the right to the songs, and one of them's an dance remix. Like what the hell? Like their cynicism about the music industry really makes sense when you consider that these guys were just playing out and just having a good time, and then they weirdly enter the music industry in this way with Gordon that I don't think they were 100% prepared for, because I think they just have fun. But then like you have something like Maybe You Should Drive, the next album, which again I'd stand on a soapbox and scream that Maybe You Should Drive is my favorite album, but because of like it's very obvious to see how they're growing and changing as people. But it's them becoming part of that machine, and it doesn't work for them. Like that's the sad thing is Gordon hits and shines bright, and then Maybe You Should Drive and Born on a Pirate Ship don't do that good. And one of the reasons why Stunt is like looked at as their breakout album in America is because it was their return to relevancy in Canada.
Yeah.
So like I'm sorry, I know that like talking about their career is just one of those things that happens when you're looking at the album that kicked the whole thing off, right?
Well, and especially because unlike a lot of artists we could talk about, an album 30 years ago did not equate to the last time we heard from them, right? Like, I mean, we just got a Barenaked Ladies album, what, last year, 2019 maybe?
I think they have a new one this year, to be completely honest with you. Like, Spotify was like, you should listen to the new Barenaked Ladies album, and I'm like, they have a new album? And then I realized that the last time I listened to a new Barenaked Ladies album was their Live from Red Rocks.
They recorded a live album at Red Rocks out here in 2016. Like,
I like that we both came to that. Yeah. And then they did the one with the Persuasions. They like actually worked with an a cappella group, which was another like release around that time. Cause I remember Silverball was the last album that I went out and bought and listened to and like really enjoyed that album. I was listening to it when I was doing like trips to New York for work. It was a good time until the fact that like it made me sleepy when I would listen to it because I'd be driving home at 2 a.m. and it triggered that. I also can't listen to it Through the Fire and the Flames because it makes me tired, because it would be the last song we would do on like Guitar Hero 3 and then I would go to bed. Yeah. So it tells my brain it's sleep time, Devin. But then they also did that. They had another album after that one too that I like. Duct Tape Heart is definitely off of Silverball. It's like one about falling, or I don't even know. I've basically gotten off of the Barenaked Ladies train after Silverball, and even then, like Grinning Streak was the one that was the last one that really hit for me.
I got to see how deep this goes. Yeah. Have you ever heard anything off of As You Like It from them in 2005? I think is what I saw as the trivia note on it.
As You Like It? I don't.
So they did the soundtrack for at the Stratford
movie?
Shakespeare Festival. Yeah. Show like live theater show of As You Like It, and the music for it was the Barenaked Ladies, and it's like a full on cast album was available at some point, but it's like one of the like elusive things. So like there's like this is how weird like some of the stuff gets with them, right? Like this is how big they kind of really were, and I think a lot of the times people tended to forget it. And maybe that's just a me thing, but like it's that idea that like when the Barenaked Ladies, like when their head pops up again, it feels like it's like a prairie dog, right? Like, oh, I haven't seen you in a long time. But the truth is that they've just been around just doing music for 30 years and like knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know about As You Like It, but like going forward, I knew about things that like um every subway car is off of and Another Thing, I believe. That was the last album I bought before I went to go work on the ocean. So like that was the only Barenaked Ladies I had for a long time. And even then, I didn't know about like the single duet version of every subway car that they did because I never got to hear them on the radio. And then like Will was like, "What do you mean you've never heard this song?" And he like pinned me down and made me listen to it. And like I had tears because it's beautiful, because it's a beautiful song anyway. But like to have it as this like actual duet is otherworldly. And then Grinning Streak, I went to Target the day that it released and bought the big copy, and I just listened to it on a loop for a month. And then Silver Ball, like that, but then everything else, like I know that they've had other albums. I mean, the other weird, like really weird thing is that prior to And Another Thing, or their 10th album, I believe is what it is. It's after Our Me and Our Men. It's the album after that has every subway car on it, and other songs that I could think of. It's below
All in
me.
Good Time.
All in Good Time, yes. I was way off.
I've got the list in front of me right now just because I'm trying to get the year on As You Like It. It's definitely 2005. But yeah, all right.
But yes,
I just don't think any of this stuff like really ever kind of hits. Like I don't think there's full albums. Maybe Stunt, but even then, Stunt's not. The Stunt doesn't have like every song on it is like not my favorite. I don't know. Gordon is just like kind of perfect from track 1 to track 15, right? Like it just
15
hits.
amazing songs, and it brings you away to a different headspace. Like I say, maybe You Should Drive is my favorite Barenaked Ladies album, but like it's always after Gordon. Like Gordon is another, it's a whole other thing. And then for other people after Stunt, like I had my friends who were Maroon fans, and I had my friends who were Everything to Everyone fans. And then like the really crazy thing they did is they recorded every single show from the Everything to Everyone tour, as Play Everywhere for Everyone was the name of the tour. And if you go on Spotify, like 30 of those live shows are available on Spotify.
Yeah.
And like that was a crazy thing because like I had to pay $60 at the show and give them like my mailing address, and they're like, "We'll send you a copy of this." And it was awesome. Like, well, maybe this is gonna work out. I hope it works out. And it did. And it's I really like, that's something that I cherish in my collection. But it was like they were always like weirdly on this cool line, like cutting edge and trying to communicate with the fans. Like that's what I think about when I think about the Barenaked Ladies, is that they cared about their fans. Now again, that's one of the reasons why after Our Men and before And Another Thing, or All in Good Time, I will get it, I promise. Like Stephen Page is kicked out of the band because like his drug and the way that he's treating fans, they can't stand for it anymore.
Yeah, it's not like they're without controversy, right? Like as much as we talked about Gordon being this great experience for them, as far as whatever they talk about, at least, they do hit a point where Stephen Page is no longer with them. But even he is still out there, still making music and stuff.
Yeah, he just recorded the song for Canada for Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah. Also, we'd be remiss if we did not at some point mention the Barenaked for the Holidays, right? Like their holiday album is like, it's a standard in a lot of the houses that I grew up in. Not just my house with my mom, although it is definitely one of her favorites. They like we'd be at all sorts of places and you'd hear various songs off of that album.
Yeah, I remember working at Walmart when it came out, and that's what we put on the like PA in the electronics department. And people loved it. We sold so many copies of that album that year. Man, Walmart, you should have never fired me because I took time off for school that I gave you 3 months notice for. And then at the last minute, you're like, "No, but we need you here." Like, no.
2007?
2006.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's peak Walmart being assholes time. I mean, they're still not great. It's just they're a lot better at hiding it now.
My academic advisor refused to speak to me the entire time that I was employed by Walmart. I got a job in November for Christmas, and he said, I'm not going to talk to you because that company is terrible. So, like, that's another story, and just like what made Devin Devin. But let's talk about Gordon again. I'm so sorry. I just have so much tied into this album. Do we
No,
want
I
to,
mean,
like,
but that's the beauty of it,
yeah,
right? Is that it represents so much more than the album itself, but on top of that, the album itself is also phenomenal. So like it is kind of one of those ones that we hold up for that reason.
yeah. All right. If you had to name a favorite song off of Gordon, what would it be for you?
Um, oh
That's
man,
a
I
hard
don't
question. I'm sorry.
know. Hello City. I would say Hello City right off the bat because it gets me so psyched for the rest of the album, you know?
This is a perfect segue for me to tell you that, Sejan, that mock turtleneck that you've been wearing is starting to smell.
Thanks. It's about time.
It reeks. That mock turtleneck just reeks. Yeah. For me,
Oh
it's
no.
Enid.
Oh no.
It's Enid because Enid being the 18th song on that Greatest Hits album, I had never, like, I did not remember that song. It's not one of those songs that I remembered off of Gordon. But then when it came time to be like, well, I want to pick up one of their albums, what will it be? Enid is what sold me. And what really sold me about Enid, and if you want to have some fun, you can go find my live journal. It's still out there. I wrote up a whole essay about Enid and the three different parts that go on in the bridge. Because I think it
Okay.
is my favorite. Like, they love Enid. Enid is one of those songs that they absolutely love, and the essay about it in on that Greatest Hits album is really good. They talk about how we like went to a Radio Shack and we bought a little like FM transmitter, and then we recorded the producer singing the song, and then we transmitted it to a radio, and then we recorded it from the radio in order to get the intro. And it's just like, well, you guys are just having a ball in the studio, right? Like, I'm jealous. Like, it seems like you guys just had a blast. And like, of
The
course
real
they
thing
can
is
do that.
nowadays any kid with an RTX board can make a sound effect, but
Right,
that's like the
right.
real
But
bummer
at the time,
about
like,
that
that's,
story.
yeah, right. It's the reason why you have to be discovered by Ursher if you want to be an international superstar.
Right, right.
It's getting hot in here, which is weird considering I'm the king of Bedside Manor. I figured I'd drop another one for everybody. But yeah, so
I thought you were making a hot in here reference, and I was like, Devin, you know that's not us, right? Like, I don't want to call you out on. Okay, okay, okay.
isn't it? It's not Ursher?
No, no.
What? No. Oh, who sings that song?
God,
R.
Devin, we're
Kelly?
talking about being naked ladies
But
right
no,
now.
but that
No,
was,
not R. Kelly.
who sings Hide Her?
Oh my
Nelly. Nelly sings it
God.
with his little band-aid that
It
says
is Nelly.
Nelly on it.
Yes, good.
Why did I think of?
Yes.
Oh, I was thinking about the one that's like, yeah, yeah. I was thinking of the song, yeah. In a
That's
club with my
that's hot.
homies.
Oh my God.
Sorry. I don't know. I used to have a different ritual for when I prepared for one of these shows. Today, I've sang Gordon 4 times. I had to drink tea because my throat was just gone. Yesterday, I listened to Stunt because on my Wednesdays, I've been listening through the Barenaked Ladies, like, discography to just feel how I used to feel about them. It's been a good time. I'm happy about it. I'm not sad about it. But yeah, but Enid, hearing them talk about that part near the end of the song after like, but I don't want to, and then it's 3 different lines of music, and I was like determined to learn the fast part that Ed sings in that part because
Yeah.
it is the lowest mix of the 3 of them, and it's fast, and it's I can teach you how to snowmobile, cross country ski, and snowshoe. That one, like, it's just so good. He can make cookie cutter Play-Doh. I just love it. But then, like, I had done so much, dedicated so much to that I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a whole 3rd part to this song that I've never listened to. Do you know what the lyrics are there, Sejan? The
No.
3rd line? It is just repeated en masse. I took you dancing, paid for your night school. Like this ethereal kind of like sweet voice on the wind thing. So just like
Yeah.
the production on Enid is this thing. Because I mean, I was working at a
It
radio
sounded. It
station.
reminded me a lot of like the Nationals while listening to some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just getting a lot of really good stuff. I mean, clearly, like being from the '80s and early '90s in Canada, right? Like they're surrounded by bands like Rush and stuff like that. But they've also at that time got like Tragically Hip and like there's a whole bunch of really good stuff coming out of Canada at that time. Loverboy is coming out of Canada at that time too, right? Like
Yeah.
like there's some really wildly like good influential music coming out of Canada, and like you can hear it in this album, right?
And that's the other thing. Like, sampling was definitely a thing because they wouldn't have said Millie. Well, I don't know. Was Millie Vanilli found out in 1992? Because they do the beautiful Millie Vanilli said you can blame it on the rain, like, reference. But then so much of this album is sampling other things. And it was before, like, they really knew what sampling was and how to, like, do the legality of it. Reading about how they got like the okay from Rush to sample, like to play the part that plays in grade 9 going into the bridge of that, the Mr. Roboto
So
stuff, like
the Milli Vanilli stuff is early 90s, 90, 91, 90. Hold on, let me double check that.
but I don't
Yeah,
know when they got
1990.
caught.
So
Like,
1991, right? Yeah. So we're talking about they kind of get found out in the late 80s, and like people start talking about it. And then by the time the media catches on and really does anything about it, it's the 90s, because it's not like nowadays where if somebody called somebody out for that shit on Twitter today, then that we'd all be talking about it tomorrow. It took a little bit. But they got exposed in the late 80s, and then by 91 they were pretty much done. Until I guess they tried a career as the real Milli Vanilli.
yeah,
I'm not even going to look into this.
don't look at the real Milli Vanilli of it. I just didn't know. So, like, again, that cynicism about the music industry and what people are willing to do just to be famous, like, that touches in Blame It On Me. And it's really interesting. But then also you got to think about, like, sampling is this kind of, like, new thing. It's being done. But, like, we had never really heard it in rock music the way that they do it. And the whole reason that's there is just when they were playing out, they would just, like, dump other songs into the stuff that they were playing.
Yeah, it's a very 90s thing, and I don't want to act like they invented it, but this idea of like the cold open to a song is something very, very popular at the time. I I think of like, doesn't Tub Thumping have like an opening like that? And like
We'll be
there's a whole
singing
bunch
while
of
we're swaying. We'll
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
saying, I'll get
So
knocked
like
down.
there's so many there's so many things that they're doing on Gordon that are also just like staples of what I consider to be like pop music that I was listening to, alt rock that I was listening to in the 90s. And this is again early 90s. This is 92. So like they're really kind of introducing a lot of these ideas to me as I'm listening to them.
Yeah. It's such a good album. But yeah, Enid, the production work on Enid is otherworldly to me. And I love other stuff in this. I think What a Good Boy is one of those songs that just hits for me. And again, like that hit and Brian Wilson, and I had only ever heard them live prior to buying a copy of Gordon and just playing it to the skids. And the actual studio versions of those songs hit me so much like more because of just like the production work on it, and clearly the fact that like they're working on them, and it's one of these things where like this is our one shot. Like they're viewing Gordon as their one shot, so like that's why they're putting the songs up there. I can forgive Brian Wilson though, because the way that they now perform Brian Wilson is based on how Brian Wilson performed it on an album.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like Brian Wilson performs your song
like
about
Smile or
Brian
something,
Wilson. It's like it's like a live album. I own a copy of it. I don't know. I remember hearing it and being
Pretty
like,
sure it's
this
the
is
Smile
fucking
Tour,
weird.
but I might be mistaken. That might be
That's not the name of the album that I have it off of though.
yeah.
So that's the problem for me. I believe I know he did it at the Smile Tour. I know that's like when he did it, but the recording that's easily accessible is off of like A Night with Brian Wilson or something like that. I don't think it's called that. But
A Night with Brian Wilson. Mostly you're just lying in bed together.
yeah. And one of you is 300 pounds, but you're floating. It's wonderful, beautiful. I think we've touched on most of the songs now, except for weirdly the one that like I never remembered hearing, which is New Kid on the Block, which
I
is
had to double check that it was not just a cover of New Kids on the Block by New Kids on the Block back when they were called the Nook. Do you know any of this story?
no.
So their original name for New Kids on the Block was Nanook, and they got sued by Columbia Pictures because of Nanook of the North. They thought they were trying to like do something. I don't know what what the whole thing was there. And no shit, Donnie Wahlberg, who had been like writing music, one of the songs he wrote for their first album was the titular song New Kids on the Block. And it became the titular song because that's what they renamed
That
themselves. They were
became
like,
their
"Fuck,
title.
Donnie's been
Yeah.
writing this song. We're just gonna call ourselves that." And everybody's like, "Yeah, all right, Donnie." But I had to double check that it wasn't just that song. I was like, wait, not like New Kid on the Block, New Kid on the Block. Oh, no, it's a different song.
No,
Okay.
it's very much cynical about what it must be like to be a new kid on the block, like in your 20s and still like identifying yourself as a kid.
Well, no, I think part of it is to what you were saying is that so much of this album is about the music industry.
Yeah.
And it feels like for me, New Kid on the Block is this idea of them being these guys that are really, really reverent to the music that came before. As I pointed out, like there's tons of influential music that you can point to coming into this album, but then also like wanting to do their own thing, which is why they kind of establish a sound that is so distinctly their own while also like referencing so many other things that they become kind of like Red Hot Chili Peppers in this way where you kind of can't really define what genre they are or what sound they have. Because they just sound like Barenaked Ladies, right? Like that's just their sound.
That is their sound.
And so they're stuck in that space in this song, right? Where they're these new kids on the block, where they're developing this new sound, probably catching a lot of shit and really scared they're not going to be popular because it's not the same as what came before. But also like they don't sound like anybody else around them either. It's a really sad song because looking back on like where they end up as musicians and where they end up kind of, you know, where they level out as in terms of quote unquote success, like they really are kind of stuck in that space of being too damn good to let go of them, but at the same time they're just never quite top of the charts anymore.
Yeah. And man, like now you're making me sad because I always applied it to the New Kids on the Block because clearly that's what they're talking about.
I mean,
when they
right?
do it.
Yeah, they're definitely
But
referencing that when they name it that.
But then it is. I mean, my favorite lyric is that like I went to sign up for the draft and the lady there just left. I love that lyric. But it is like when you look at it, yeah, they are kind of like that because if you listen to some of their other work, right, especially something like Army and Our Men, like there's so much like personal stuff behind a lot of those songs that like don't sound like One Week, don't sound like Old Apartment, but at the end of the day, like that's all people really want from the Barenaked Ladies, and that's sad. Like imagine that, like that'd be heartbreaking to me, right?
I mean, to the credit of both of those songs, though, they do a beautiful job of following a very pop formula in like their, you know, the look of the song, but they still have that dark humor that we really like from them. They still have really interesting moments of musicality in them. Like those songs, while definitely being their poppiest of pop songs, are still way more interesting than so much stuff that gets shoved out there, right? Like they still manage to, in even their most marketable music, they still manage to put their own stamp on it, which is a blessing and a curse because as I stated, like it puts them in this weird space where they're so much fun to listen to, but just like they just never quite seem to get over that hump of popularity that they need to be the superstars.
I mean, that's always been the hardest thing for me is like I've seen them 6 times, right? And I'm going because I appreciate like the deeper musicality. I've listened to the albums. I know this stuff. And like there are some people who listen to Old Apartment and think that it's just about what it appears to be about, is what I'm going to say. But then like if you listen to that song, like maybe like even like just 4 times, like you start to realize what is actually there or what they're actually trying to say in that music. And when I would go to these shows, the people that I would run into and meet were always like just that surface level. I really like the way this stuff sounds. And that was like heartbreaking for me to like not be able to have like a conversation of depth about this band that meant so much to me.
Yeah, I definitely can appreciate that. I just think it's important to remember in these times when you feel like I've been listening to these guys for years kind of stuff. Like you got to remind yourself that like people discover this stuff for different reasons and in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, that same guy could be talking about this music now 20 years out and having these feelings, but also like attaching yourself to them because of their musicality is no joke. Like that, there is a lot of really interesting stuff going on there. And I know a lot of people where that's why they like the Barenaked Ladies is because they're just much more interesting to listen to. They don't necessarily get down on like the, well, I want to get into the dark humor that is, you know, the essence of my soul on this album. Like that's just not why they're here, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like and the ways in which BNL has been able to appeal to that is really important and why they still stick around despite never being like Super Bowl like halftime show material. Like it's because they're still pretty damn good. Like you don't discount them, right?
Yes, and I don't want to like come across as anything. It was one of these moments where like I had found a band that like that spoke to me. It was stuff that was like connecting with the thoughts that I was having, like in a creative space and like in just the way I was approaching the world. And then like to go to a show and like hope that there are other people like that, and then just not being able to find that. It was a
Yeah.
moment for me. I'm not gonna
Well, I
lie.
mean, now we're talking about where what we're talking about is why college is so important, right? Is it's the
Yeah,
time for you to get out into the world and find people like you because it feels like you can't find anybody like you when you're in high school.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's a problem with the world in general, sure. But luckily we have Discord nowadays. I bet you could find a great Discord group about
No,
Bare Naked
no, I
Ladies.
wouldn't. I'm too far removed. Like one of the whole things that kicked off this Bare Naked Ladies thing for me, right, is I've made some new friends in 2022, and I really like them. I'm really happy with the
You
new
have
friends
friends
that I've made.
besides me?
I'm sorry, Sejin. I thought you knew. If all else fails, you just blame it on me, big guy, right? And when
Nice.
the white flag is flown, that doesn't mean that someone's won the war. But I'm just crazy. Oh, we haven't talked about crazy, and that's a seems like a good place to end it. But I've made it, and it was one of those situations where we were hanging out, and we'd hung out like a couple of times, and I was asked, like, it occurs to me, we've never really talked about the music that you like. And I'm like, that's insane to me. What an insane thing to say to Devin Decker, because I feel like all I do is talk about the music that I like. Now, granted, I have very wide tastes. I enjoy all sorts of different types of music. But like the fact that to have someone look at me and say like, I don't know the type of music you like was crazy to me. And I'm like, really, I will listen to anything, right? I'm
There
willing
it
to
is.
give right,
That's more I think the point is it's not necessarily I couldn't pin down the kind of music you listen to. I don't know what kind of music you like because you just listen to anything.
that's very true. My number one song, because we're also recording this when everybody got their Spotify wrap ups for the year. I like that they do that because then I don't have pressure in December. I can just listen to Christmas music if I want to. And my number one song this year, with apologies to Siege and Sarowick, was Boom 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 by the Venga Boys.
Nice.
And I'm just
Don't have
like,
to apologize to me.
no, I do, because we were playing co-op games together, and I was singing it at you in order to throw you off your game. That's all I could think of the day that I put it on repeat to throw you off your game. I think we were Mario Karting.
Yeah, I mean it must have been something like
Yeah.
Mario Kart.
And it was just like, and I'm like, that's my number one song. But then my number one band this year is Barenaked Ladies. And
Yeah.
did I send you my list of of the things, or I'll put
Not
them
yet.
here. And
I
I'm sure,
sent out mine, but you got to send me yours so that we
yeah.
can talk
Well,
about
we'll
it
talk
when we
about
do
it
the show
on
officially.
the actual show visually.
Yeah.
But I will say this, right? When you say it, and this is fun, right? It's like a callback to something that hasn't happened yet. You're going to see that my like taste in music, according to Spotify, have not changed that much since the college.
Yeah, I mean,
So
like
when
you
we
saw
met each
mine.
other, yeah,
I listened to 93 different genres of music. They literally told me I was unclassifiable as a genre
yeah.
fan.
But yes, but that person asked me what type of music do you like, and I'm like, really, I'll listen to anything. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he turns on like it was Spotify. I think it might have been Amazon Music. And the top thing, like the last listen to, was Barenaked Ladies. And I can tell you, like, there's a little guy inside of me that's like, oh my God, he likes the Barenaked Ladies. Like, this is excellent. And he's like, oh, I don't know why that's there. Probably because like my sister was listening to that music. And I'm just like, oh no. And then he put on Hotel California by the Eagles. And I'm like, that's a bold swing in the conversation of what type of music do you like? To then put on Hotel California by the Eagles. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the Eagles. I'm not one of these people who despises the Eagles, but I don't think I'm ever going to forget that day where I'm just like, are we going to just fucking bang out to the Barenaked Ladies right now? Bang out was the wrong word. Are we just going to rock out to some Barenaked Ladies right now? Does he like, I think I have some idea of what you like. Drove downtown in the rain. No. He put on Hotel California by the Eagles. And that just represents something in my mind. I gotta be honest with you.
Oh man. Man.
But it's good. Like,
I have never, you know what the other crazy thing is, like, kind of in this vein though, of like admitting like fandom, all that sort of stuff. I don't know if I've ever met anybody, it seems like you have, but I don't know if I've ever met anybody that has ever outwardly talked about like Barenaked Ladies is just not for them, right? I have met multiple people that are on the level of you right now, right? Like talking about this idea that like, oh, I just got so into them, I had to buy every album, I had to learn the music, I got the special edition so that I could read the liner notes, all of this stuff. Like this is a conversation. The other reason why we wanted to record this is because this is a conversation that I have had with just more than one human in my life.
Thank you. I'm glad that you've had it with more. I mean, I think of listening to Barenaked Ladies with you when we were driving around. You and the traffic troll in the car, making sure that I don't drive too fast.
Boy, he was really concerned about your license, and he really failed at his duties.
Well, to be fair, you didn't give me the traffic troll until after I lost my license.
Oh, that's good.
And have I lost my license since?
I was going to say, in retrospect, he didn't do much good, but I guess he was after the fact.
Yeah, and it didn't have a weird name like Pillow Pants. That's a sick reference I just made. But yeah, it's just I guess that's true. I will say some of the like more intimate relationships that I have had with people have been based on, oh, you like the Barenaked Ladies? No, you don't. No, you don't like the Barenaked Ladies. I could sing 1 week right now, and I'm like, I could sing 1 week right now. What is happening right now?
Oh, yeah, no, the mega fans are just the worst. And when I say mega fan, I don't mean the mega fans of Barenaked Ladies. I mean, as a caricature, the mega fan, right? That character for Barenaked Ladies, that guy's the worst. And the big time that you run into them is karaoke nights, right? Where it's always like some group wants to get up there and do like, and do Old Apartment or If I Had $1,000,000, and they're having fun with it, and then some guy in the audience is just like, you want to do Barenaked Ladies, you got to do one of the good ones. And it's just like, whoa, but like, what are you doing? Like that attitude is pervasive when it comes to those kinds of, like I said, the mega fan it's not great.
Yeah. What I used to do acoustic karaoke, which is very cool because there's like a live guy playing guitar with you, and you like need to know how to sing, right? Like it's not you don't have you just have sheet music in front of you. You don't have a little computer telling you when to sing. It's very interesting.
I'm sure that nowadays they probably do have a one where they can do the scrolling.
Okay, well, I mean, I was doing this back in the Two Friends days. So, like, right. 2015, 2006, 2014. Like, it was new at the time. And it was a lot of fun. And I would always do Brian Wilson, right? Because there was one of the Barenaked Ladies who did. And I'm to my own horn here. I do a pretty good Brian Wilson. I'm not going to lie. And one night, someone signed up. And I had, like, arrived, but I hadn't signed up for anything yet. Like, I was just getting settled, and someone went up and they're like, I want to do Brian Wilson, and the guy's like, actually, he does that song, so like, no. And that was a moment where I'm just like, no, let the person sing the song. I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy who's gonna be like, that's my only song.
Yeah, no, and like I said, they became one of those kinds of bands that is just like they've got just enough fans that there are people out there that lay claim to them as if they are the only ones that listen to them.
Yeah.
And I am always more fascinated at the number of people I know still do. It's, I don't know. I think that's just a product of the 90s, really. I don't want to blame this on them because I don't think they've ever personally promoted this attitude in their fans. Quite the opposite. I mean, like, they literally had a tour about it, right? Like,
like it's,
but I don't think that this is something that comes from them.
I will say though, I did parlay that into something pretty great because the guy who was playing the guitar, he used to be an SR-71, and one of the songs that he had in his book was Right Now.
Nice.
And then he's like, I don't do that song though, it's just there. And so that night where I let someone else do Brian Wilson, I'm like, I'm doing Right Now though. Like that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna let me do.
Owe me.
like you tell the guy he does Brian Wilson. That says to me, you have some idea of my ability as a singer.
Some modicum of respect for what I could do on this stage. Yeah.
So I got to sing Right Now with the guitarist from SR-71.
Oh yeah, man.
And like to the point where he's like, I never do that song, but like I'll let you do that anytime. That was pretty great. Like it felt pretty good, Sejin. And now we're just talking about music, and that's why we don't do a lot of these episodes, I think is the problem. I love covering music on the show, but like music is such a big topic for the two of us that it's very difficult for us to stay like on target, especially on a show about everything, right? Like this could have easily become us talking about Gregorian chanting for 2 hours.
Almost did. It's the Christmas season and the Gregorian Christmas albums that I've got.
That wasn't good at all.
That sounded more like Peruvian throat singing.
Yeah,
really,
that's actually what I did. I don't know how to be Gregorian.
I don't know how to...
That's my secret shame.
Man.
It's my secret shame that I'm hiding in the time capsule.
Where is the land of Gregory anyway?
I don't know. I know where the land of Nod is. It's in the Bible. So I guess Crazy. I don't think we ever touched on Crazy. Crazy is my favorite song to watch them do live. And that is what I'm
I was going to say the best parts of Crazy are actually the like weird like jam band-esque like solo moments in the last like 2/3 of it.
Yeah. And that's fantastic, but they start out, they all crowd around just the one microphone and they sing it together, because the other thing that's great about Crazy is that 5-part harmony that they do.
Yeah.
That is just like, let's do it.
I'm starting to understand why they might have been picked up by a cappella group so quick.
Yeah. That's what they did. They did a bunch of that. Like you couldn't be a member of the Barenaked Ladies if you couldn't sing. Like that was that thing. Like when they lost Stephen Page, everybody was like, "What's gonna happen?" And it's like, well, Kevin Hearn can sing, and he's been doing the songs. It's like, we're gonna be okay. We're gonna have to do a live album at Universal Studios in Orlando, but we're gonna be okay. Yeah. And that's the other thing. Like, I do want to just mention the other personnel who are on this album, like the main band at the time, because there's been so many changes. And Gordon starts with Stephen Page and Ed Robertson as like the main vocals of the whole outfit. You have, I can never remember the drummer's name, so I'm going to say Jim Cregan on bass and Andy Cregan on keyboards. Can you come in? Because I want to call him Steve Tyler, and I know it's not Steve Tyler.
Steve Tyler.
It's
No,
Tyler.
let me hold on.
I never remember the percussionist name because I think about Stephen Page, and then I think about him who is Tyler, and I'm just like, I'm a fool. I'm a damn fool. So if you could do that for me, Eddie, I'd appreciate it.
Tyler Stewart?
Tyler Stewart. See, and it's
There
also
we go.
TS, right? So it's very easy to get. Yeah, Tyler Stewart is the percussion on this one. And they're great. They're fantastic. They're together through Maybe You Should Drive. And then Andy Cregan goes off to college. A lot of people say that he got sick or that he maybe passed away. That's not what happened. Kevin Hearn had come in to do the Born on the Pirate Ship tour. And then on stunt, he got diagnosed with leukemia. So he was doing chemotherapy and not performing at the time. But a lot of it gets like, that's what happened to the first keyboardist of the Barenaked Ladies. Like, no, actually, he went to college and then he went on to record albums with his brother.
Yeah, I think it's more that people forget that what do you call it wasn't around. Yeah, I think it's more about people not knowing that he wasn't always there. It's so when they say the first drummer or the first, when they say the first, he was the pianist, right?
He's the keyboardist.
Yeah,
he does other percussion too. Like he's secondly
right.
He would technically.
But I think when they say that, they are talking
about
about her, and they just don't realize that what they're saying is a misnomer.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, this is a great album. It's an album that I'm happy to celebrate 30 years later. I can't believe it's 30 years old, which also means that I'm 30 years older than when it came out.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. Who knows, man? But it's good. Anything else you want to say on the album? Like anything that we didn't touch on? Anything that like you think is important on this one?
No, you know, it's if you're gonna if you haven't ever listened to this album or you've not listened to it in a long time, any of that, do yourself a favor, just blog out just what is it, like 30 minutes
45
when it's
minutes.
done, 45
45
minutes when it's
minutes and
done.
23
Yeah,
seconds.
just blog out some time. Maybe you're like doing dishes and you just need something on in the background for 45 minutes or something like that, and just listen to the album start to finish because this album is just it's just amazing. And then, you know, after that, you may find that you only come back to it for, you know, if I had $1 million, or you may, because I'm imagining at this point you're doing this on Spotify. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody out there is going out and buying this album.
But go out and buy
That
this album. That's what I'm going to say. I don't know if they did a 30th anniversary release. They probably didn't because of the nature of the music industry now, but I could be completely wrong with that thought. But if you're
it'll
able,
be a 35 in 5 more years. They'll
of
put a
course,
35th.
right. And Mario will be there, killing
Yes,
98.
no, this is apparently what we do now. Is we just talk about 35 now.
Yeah, so which the other reason why we hid away this 30th year celebration in a time capsule so that the causality police don't come and get us. But this is
They'll never find it.
this is an album worth owning, is what I'm going to say. I've heard it on vinyl. It is warm. It is a delightful tune. It is a delightful album. You're not going to be sad if you give this 45 minutes of your time. And I think that the perfect way to listen to Gordon, just from my point of view, is driving. This is the perfect driving album. Now, of course, gas is $700 a gallon at the time that we're releasing this, maybe. But this is when I think about
Gas wars have begun, so maybe this isn't the best advice, but
yeah, it is Gordon. I mean, maybe
gas wars have been going on for decades. Relax, everybody.
This guy talking about the gas wars. but no, this is an album that's worth your time. So if you're one of those people who only know the Barenaked Ladies from Stunt, go back to Gordon. You'll be glad that you did. Because this is a certified banger. This whole album, like I can't think of one song on this album that I'd be like, oh, I could skip it. I don't need to deal with it. Like
there are ones that I kind of fade out from now after hearing this album my whole life that I'm not necessarily tuned into. Like I you know, I Love You, Wrap Your Arms Around Me. I understand like the beauty in those songs, but they're like, much like I said before, if you find yourself coming back to this album for like one or two tracks, I totally get it. And this is why, is because there's even a couple of tracks on this album that I'm not necessarily coming here for them, but if there's gonna be, filler has a negative connotation, but if there's going to be those other tracks there, I'm glad that it's ones like Wrap Your Arms Around Me and I Love You. Like, I'm glad those are the ones taking up that space.
The important thing about those songs is, like, I guess what I would point to for Gordon and why Gordon is something I wanted to celebrate the way that we have. I don't know if this has been a good celebration. You can weigh on with us at the Say Report on Twitter, if Twitter still exists, of course. But when I look at albums that should be experienced as a whole, right?
Yeah. Yes.
This is one of those this is one of the first things that I will put up as evidence. Because where Sejan says that he kind of drifts out with like Wrap Your Arms Around Me, the 6th track, like that is after 5 songs that are going full fucking tilt. 700,000 miles an hour. Sonic the Hedgehog is left in the dust by how,
I mean, it's
like,
led in by Be My Yoko Ono, which has just like the most ridiculous ending to it and everything. Like it is, it is all climb for the first 5 tracks for sure.
Hello City might start cool, but then by the end of it, you're like, holy fuck, we're in the city. And then so it's all build. And then what Wrap Your Arms Around Me does in this way that like you don't see it when you're just getting singles, right? It is this kind of like cool down moment where like you get to like prepare yourself. And then it goes into What a Good Boy, which is another one of those like cool down songs. And then you go into like what is the peak of this album as far as I'm concerned, King of Bedside Manor into Box Set, where you're just like, holy fucking shit, what is happening to me? What
is
what
What a
are
Good
these
Boy
feelings?
a waltz? Is it a waltz, or at least in its chorus? No, it's not really. There's just, see, so What a Good Boy, I was going to say, is one that definitely, though, I come back in for, and it is still on that cooler level, like you're talking about. So it's interesting that there are these cool down songs, and it's where you are on the ride, right? Like, it's exactly what you're saying, is that you have this build, and then there's a little bit of a dip, just because you need that, because you need to catch your breath, and then you come back in with King of Bedside Manor. So, like, the ups and downs of this album are so perfectly, like measured, you know, and all of that is part of that marketing machine, that music machine that we're talking talking about them kind of getting clearly wanting to be a part of, like that's why they're here, right? And clearly being good enough at it that they're still here 30 years later, right? So like there is this element to it where like they understand the music industry, and you can see that so well in just this album, which, as Devin pointed out, is pretty much their premiere album in terms that they cut it onto a damn disc.
Yeah. And that was everything at the time, right? 92, if you didn't have a CD, you were fucking nothing, right? Even though I didn't own a CD
Everybody
player.
had a tape, right?
Yeah.
If Airheads taught us anything, everybody's got a tape.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's 2 years later. But it is. And this is the weird thing, and like sort of the sad thing is, and because selling out is the goal of every musician, right? We talk about, oh man, you're such a sellout. But like most of these musicians who want to get into the industry, they want to sell out because they want to make the money, right?
I mean, it's called success, guys.
Yeah,
like the real term for selling out is success.
Yeah, you succeeded, and now you're able to eat, right? And you're not having ramen noodles for every meal. Congratulations. Yeah. I'm very proud of you, actually. I know it sounds like I'm not. I'm being sarcastic.
But I mean, they're even riding the 2 year cycle that is like created by the American music industry of like release the album, work on the album for a year. At the end of that year, the album comes out, and then you tour on that album. But while you're touring, you better be working on the next album, because then you're going to work on getting that next album together. And then the next year after that, you're going to tour that one. And they're doing exactly that. Like the 2 year cycle is pretty much how they do business up until like
2003. Because then they break down after that, and then they do the double album Army and Our Men, which comes out in 2007. And at that point, they're like, we're not with a label. This is an independent release because we have stuff that we want to do. We want to break out of that system. And then it's from there that like 2010, because Army, Our Men, that like weird double album, which like also all sorts of, like, I talk about how nefarious the music industry is now. The fact that if you pre-order Army, you'll get the second album right now. If you find a copy of Barenaked Ladies Are Men single, right? That is a rare CD. That's a
I mean, we've actually got a better perfect example of this in what Taylor Swift did, where she released the dual albums last year. Remember, like 6 months apart from each other.
Yeah.
And it was this huge drop. And what she did is that she just didn't tell anybody that she was doing it.
Yeah.
Again, independently on her own. She was just like, I'm going to do this thing. But she just didn't do any of there was no intended like marketing or anything out there, which threw everybody for a loop. Meanwhile, Barenaked Ladies already did this 20 years ago.
Yeah, they did it 20 years ago, and the worst part about it is that like they had a podcast. That's how I knew about that album, and they did like the second song off of Army. I can't think the name of it, but I saw them do a Christmas concert at Mohegan Sun, and they're like, before we get into the Christmas stuff, we have a new song that we'd like to play for you guys. And I'm like, this song is awesome. When is this album coming out? And then it didn't come out for like 2 years after I saw them play it. Adrift is the name of the song.
Can you imagine being given just as much time as they wanted to just do what they wanted, as opposed to being on that cycle, right? Yeah. Like it.
And those two albums, they define like the end of college for me, because I did not buy into the whole I bought them separately. I did buy them separately, but I had a friend who, let's just say, got them through less than legal means, and who burned.
It was the late 2000s, and we were in college. Everybody knows what we're talking about.
And he put them on my iPod, and I knew both of the albums, but I remember that time where I like took
you got that old lemon string on your computer. You know that's bad for the.
That's bad for you. Did you
get a virus?
Did you have the thing where like did you ever have an Apple computer, I guess is the question?
No, I never in my life.
Like iTunes could just communicate with each other, so they had an application where you could just share music.
Yes, that I did know about, because I did have an iPod, and we would talk about that.
Yeah,
I would go. I think I've told this before, but the engineering frat house, essentially, that was on campus, the engineering building that all the guys lived at, it was technically owned by the school, so I don't think it was qualified as a frat. But they had at the time, I think 400 gigabyte server, which in the 2000s was nuts, that they would all just dump all of their stuff onto, right? And that was where a lot of the Apple sharing stuff was going on, was because then they didn't even have to waste that storage space. But it was is a weird thing that Apple was kind of at the forefront of. I mean, just much like they were kind of at the forefront of uh what's the with video games, they were making not mods, not ROMs, emulators. They were also
Yeah.
at the forefront of that sort of stuff too, right? Like Apple has weirdly always been very happy to adopt these questionable things that are out there to see if they can do anything, legalize it. Look at what they did with the music industry.
Yep. Yeah, that was. I remember when that all happened. There's a topic for another day. Is just what iTunes means to me. Do you remember the first song you ever bought?
On iTunes.
Yeah.
On iTunes, first song I ever bought. No. It was probably a Barenaked Ladies song.
Makes sense. The first song that I bought on iTunes, and I didn't even buy it. I used a Pepsi cap to
Oh, okay.
download it for free.
Yeah.
Because, if you bought a Pepsi in the years that we were in college, you got a free download on iTunes. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to try it. It was I Can't Go For That by Hall & Oates. Because the episode of Ed that I had watched that morning was Captain Lucidity, the one where he's lucid dreaming, and Hall & Oates perform in that episode. And so I bought a
man.
Pepsi, and I got that, and I'm like, I'm downloading that song from Ed that I heard this morning. And then I have a whole playlist in Apple. I don't even know if they're available anymore, right? Because just through the nature of like licensing, that was purchased with Pepsi bottle caps.
Yeah.
Those are good times. Sometimes I miss college, and that's not really what the episode's about. It's about Gordon. It's a fantastic album, King Gordon, right? Dun 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 dun. And if I phoned my friends in Ireland, sorry. But yeah, so that's it. Anything else, Season, before we send this one off?
We mentioned all of the guys in the band. We should probably also at this point mention Michael Woja Wuda. Is that how you said his name?
Yeah, Woja Wuda.
Yeah. Just another contributor to this album that I like. That's also something that I think we kind of forget is like part of the reason why this album maybe hits like it does and we don't really see much after is because I don't think Woja Wuda does much with them later on.
Yeah, I don't think so. He might have worked on a couple of albums afterwards, but I mean, this is one of those situations where like these are fresh guys granted free studio space to record a like for real album. And they're lucky enough to have a producer on that album who completely aligns with their vision, who doesn't look at what they're doing and say, no, that's not how you record an album, who doesn't stifle them in any way, shape, or form. And actually, we mentioned it briefly, The Flag is the song that made him say, no, I'm going to just let these guys do whatever the fuck they want. Because, like, clearly they're young, but they have something to say.
Yeah, and he's a producer from up in Canada that just has discovered all sorts of crazy music over the years, and so he's just having him in the booth and helping produce this stuff definitely also helps explain where some of the success of this album comes from too.
Oh yeah, I mean the whole thing is that like everybody loved them. They won a popularity contest to get that studio time.
Right.
Like you need to consider that. I guess if we're also shouting out like other personnel who are on this. Chris Brown, the keyboardist from Canada, who would fill in for Kevin Hearn on the stunt tour when he was getting chemotherapy for his leukemia. He said a beautiful thing about Gordon that I will always remember. And it's basically, if you were a musician in Canada in 1991 to 1992, you're on the album Gordon in some way, shape, or form. Because they were just having people come in and sample. I mean, like, when they talked to Rush about using that stuff, Rush was like, oh, yeah, do you guys want to, like, jam out a little bit? Like,
that sounds like very much like Rush.
Yeah. Like, you guys
That's awesome. You guys want to play some music sometime?
You guys want to play, like,
today,
music
Rush.
on this? You want to, like, you got the studio, you want us to come in? Like, yeah, yes, come in, Rush. What? Like, yeah, it's just... They don't make them like this anymore, right? They still make them, and that blows me away, right? I mean, we've mentioned her a lot, but Taylor Swift releasing Midnights and like every song essentially being single ready so that it could take over all 10 spots on the Billboard charts. Everybody talks about how that's historic. I'm less impressed by the fact that every single spot on the Billboard chart in the top 10 was a Taylor Swift song, and more impressed by the fact that she was able to put together 13 songs,
Yeah.
of which 10 were like single ready in the eyes of just the music industry, to the fact that it would dominate the chart that way. Because that's unheard of. That's the most impressive thing to me. But, like, aside from Midnight's, can you name any other albums that came out this year?
No, I can't name albums. Like, I would have to pull up my Spotify to look at like songs, but I can't think of any. Like, I know, I can tell you that the Black Keys put an album out this year, and I honestly couldn't tell you the name of it right now, because I could probably, because I've been listening to them on like shuffle, so like it's probably at this point embedded itself in my brain as if it came out 20 years ago, you know?
Right, exactly. It's just, it all mires together. I love Spotify, don't get me wrong, but it has affected how I listen to things. Apparently not as much as
I'm
I
not gonna
thought,
blame
though.
Spotify for that, because it's been this way since Apple really got involved. Like, that's really the big story there, is like turning the music industry from an album industry into a single industry is solely on the shoulders of Apple.
I'll agree. It's the truth, so I why wouldn't I agree? I guess, you know what the crazy thing is to me, and this is more Spotify stuff, and I'm sure we already talked about it, so you can tune out for this part, right? This can be your personal wrap your arms around me of the Gordon episode.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to so little music compared to everybody else that I know. Like, we'll look at the numbers, but it blows me away to see how many minutes you've listened to and how many minutes I've listened to.
Well, you also have to remember that they literally said I listened to more music than 92% of the people on Spotify this year.
Yeah,
so I'm not really a good example.
And Sejan, I know people who listen to 3 times the amount of music you listen to. Like, that, those are other ones that have been shared with me. And like, I love music, but I here's the thing. I'm Devin Decker. I give 100% in almost everything that I do. So if I'm listening to music, I want to be 100% in the music. I am jealous of you guys out there who can like put on Spotify and play a video game. Like, I can't do that. I need to be either committed to the music or committed to the video game.
I mean, the thing is like, I can do that too. Like, I have those times where I want to just listen to a new album that's come out or something, or I've got records that like, this is what we're doing tonight. I'm going to put this record on and just like chill out with this. Like, I also have those nights as well. I just also, while I'm doing other stuff, I just need background noise, you know? Yeah. And like, I need background noise that I'm familiar with enough that I can tune it out, and that usually becomes music I like, you know?
And I get it, and it's cool. It's just, that's not the one thing where I can do with music is drive. And again, it became very cost prohibitive back at the start of the gas wars in the early aughts.
Right.
All right, so thank you so much for joining us in this time capsule episode where we celebrated Gordon by the Barenaked Ladies. Go out and listen to it. Is out there. You probably subscribe to something. If not, I'm sure the whole thing is available on YouTube. There'll be some ads occasionally if you don't have an ad blocker, assuming ad blockers still exist. Usually this is where I would say you can find Sejan on Twitter, but Sejan revealed last episode, relative to our recording, that he's no longer on Twitter. So if you have something for Sejan, the best place to reach him is directly at The Say Report on Twitter, which is at The Say Report.
Yeah, and if you want to reach Dev and talk to him about maybe what your experience was listening to Gordon from beginning to end, hit him up and let him know, and you can find him at Devin D. Decker.
I'll munch him down like Kit Kats and crackers. I love listening to people talk about this album. And that's something that you can take to the bank, which is not a reference to the songs on this album.
I'm going to go and make myself a craft dinner.
Oh, that's a good idea. Are you going to put Dijon ketchup on it? Mike had magic glasses. Will, bring us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.